All right. So, trying to figure out how I want to best set this up as a community leader, somebody who is constantly thinking about belonging, people, culture, values, um, and knowing that we just recently gone through the presidential election of 2024, knowing that we just witnessed the uh, return of President, former president, now President-elect Donald Trump, and the 170 days of campaigning that current Vice President Kamala Harris just went through, and the ongoing rhetoric that's kind of occurring during this season. And I'm not a person that has been overtly engaged in politics in this way or even communicating it to kind of talk through policies and practices and, you know, things of that nature. It might change in the future just because everything is political, uh, but not in a way to create divisiveness, but to create unity. Because I have to understand, or I want to understand those aspects of our society in order to usher in this inclusive leadership, usher in this belonging culture and these communities where every identity can belong and thrive. And it's hard to do that if there is factions of our society where you don't have knowledge in. And so while I've learned and grown in my knowledge of doing this in coaching sports and in workplace culture, in, understanding in it from like a business perspective, being able to understand it from a political and a government, local, national, federal government aspect is probably going to be the next step of the journey. But that's not why I'm here. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to talk about this concept of listening versus hearing. And I don't know what happened, but I was just putzing around in my office doing some work, and I had like a vivid a experience or thought of maybe my mom, maybe my grandmother, somebody in my family often talking about, I know you hear me, but are you listening? Like actually saying that phrase. And it might be just in the zeitgeist of Black culture where usually there is this common thing of like, okay, I know you hear me, but are you actually listening? And early on, in your childhood, you don't really process, think about that, right? It's all the same. Hearing, listening, it's the same thing. But as I am processing and understanding life moving forward, there are distinct differences between hearing and listening. Hearing, to my understanding, is just the sound waves that occur around you that transmits from your ears to your brain, right? So being able to hear the tree falling in the forest, hearing the sound that it makes, or the dinging of your notifications and hearing that, or hearing the sounds of I don't know, the ice maker in your refrigerator, just things like that. Hearing is completely different. Hearing is just hearing the noise. But then listening is the ability to comprehend what that noise means and how to interpret that for further action. So if I hear a notification in my mind, I'm learning, okay, is that a notification for my messages, for my mail, for the Microsoft Teams? If I'm hearing a noise downstairs, is that I'm listening to hear what kind of noise that is to and decide, is that something that I need to take action in? Like, is somebody in my house or is that just the microwave? Um, that seems so rudimentary and fundamental to our ability for personal growth, for community growth. But it's actual putting it to action in every facet that will help us gain this greater understanding and help us build this camaraderie and to build this culture of community and belonging. I think where I'm tying both the introduction of understanding our politics to the hearing and listening is that what would it look like for us to do a better job of actually listening to the voices that are impacted in our society to help us comprehend and understand what type of environment and community that we will want to create? How could we listen well to everybody, every voice, and work to distill it to enough to help us decide what is the best approach towards the common goal that we're trying to seek? Where is the middle ground that we can strive to work towards? And is it appropriate to decide what is the areas that we can compromise or not based upon the end goal that we're trying to reach, the desire of safety or desire of belonging, the desire of economic growth, the desire of love, the desire of these different things that from our human experience that we can like agree on, saying, yes, we agree on these things. And here are the ways that we're going to go about executing that, right? Uh, through listening, through understanding historical and current context and future goals, through creating environments where there is that dialogue that's being fostered, and the dialogue is happening in a respectful manner, in a manner that helps us grow and understand in our knowledge to help us make better inclusive decisions, versus the hearing side where it all just sounds like noise. It all just sounds like activity happening around us, and we're not taking a moment to process and comprehend what those activities mean in the work that we do and how we lead and how we engage our community and our people. Where I'm noticing, and maybe it's just the noise of social media, which is, I know that's not our world, but just there seems to be a lot more processing of, how do I want to say this? There seems to be more of like, or is less of hearing. Let me reframe it this way. The voices that are being shared seems to be engaged from a hearing posture versus a listening posture. And I wonder, what will it take for us to transition to that listening posture and make those steps to engage the dialogue that is happening with the decisions that we're making from that sense of understanding, from that sense of empathy, and less about, hey, I'm gonna make this decision and deal with it and then I'll listen. But before we make the decision, we decide to stop and actually understand the impact of the decision before we move forward. And we hopefully take in the data points. Hopefully we have a general framework or a collective framework, or understand what that framework means, so we know how to engage with it and be able to speak to it in a way that helps shape the decisions being made, versus just seeing it as noise, seeing it as a squeaky wheel, seeing it as something that we don't even need to consider because of our own lens and perspective of what success or of what our goals look like. So in this political space, and because it's always in our face, the idea of not empathizing with people who experience loss, grief, and pain, sorrow with the decision that was made, I mean, that sucks. Like that sucks to not be like, dang, like you tried really hard to push this to, push Kamala Harris to be the president, and it didn't work out. And instead of saying, okay, like, what does unity still look like in this space? We're still spitting in people's faces. And I know during the campaign trail, it happened on both sides. Like, I think I may have mentioned in one of my TikToks about, like, in videos about how, what would it look like if we engage, stop with the slandering, stop with the throwing lobs over the other side of the fence and saying, you know what, like, I don't care about you and your perspective. Like, what would it look like if there was truly like a sense of respect, of honor, of grace, of gratitude, of empathy, of understanding in the dialogue that we have? And the disagreements is more of the approach towards the same goals, not disagreeing in the whether or not somebody's humanity is valuable or not, right? And that's where I'm coming at. And I think that's what I would hope. That's why my sense of like, okay, how do I understand the noise of politics to help me understand how I engage with it and engage other people with it? With people who may see a different lens than I do, how can I take the time to understand what that looks like, and maybe even clarify what my lens is too? Because there could be an option out there where there is success for everybody. And it may not be the full 100% of what we want, but it could, I think we could both reach a common understanding if we're willing to take a moment to sit and process that. And as somebody, one of our local leaders mentioned to me, being able to have the emotional resiliency to process that for ourselves and not hear things and see things, and we can feel the emotion, and as we feel the emotion, how can we still engage with the dialogue or discussion or take the steps that we need to process that in a way for us to re-engage in the discussion, re-engage in conversation, re-engage in policy changes, re-engage in community work for success, and not immediately shut somebody off or cut somebody down if they don't agree with the viewpoints that we have. Now, I know our tolerance level as a people, as a society, it ranges. So I'm not saying that, like, I guess what I want to make sure is that we know what our range is, and then we know what to do next. So somebody may have a low tolerance in patience, and understand that, like, hey, I don't have tolerance for that. I don't have time for that. I don't have perspective for that. But what will you do to make that chime, right? What will you do to make that ability to have perspective? Or let's understand what happened in the past, or what has happened to help that has led you to this point. Are you doing that work? Am I doing that work to understand one another so that I can understand that, yeah, you don't have time for dialogue because you've been talking for however many years and haven't seen growth and path. You just want to see action. I get that. And for those who are engaging in or at that dialogue phase, be able to recognize that, hey, those are showing signs that somebody has a low tolerance and low patience for this. So what do I need to do to change my communication, or what steps do I need to take to hopefully bridge that gap so there can be growth versus just an immediate shutdown or immediate, like, staying in our feelings or whatnot, right? So I don't know if, or I don't know. I would want, my desire is that there is opportunity of self-reflection, opportunity of self-awareness, opportunity of social awareness to know where, what range we are at when it comes to these discussions and dialogues, and we're doing our own work to prepare ourselves for that listening space, and not just be hearing things as, and not just see the noise, or see, not just engage with voices as just noise. So I want to develop a framework to help process that. I want to help develop a framework that incorporates more of a listening, more of a inclusive leadership, decision making aspect. And I know there's a bunch of frameworks that already exist, and I want to engage with you all of, what do you need to help you move from a posture of hearing to listening? What does that look like for you? What have you done? What work are you doing to engage with that? Who do you look up to that models that well? And how do we share that knowledge across the board so that way we all can be a community that is engaging in this collective goal versus continuing to divide and separate ourselves because there is an unwillingness from ourselves or others to listen. So I wanted to get off my chest. I don't know where that will live. I don't know if that makes sense, but holla at me, Arita. We'll love to hear your perspective on these things.